In 1908, a Kansas farmer named Henry Walsh stopped a masked intruder with a weapon that fit in his palm. It weighed under a pound, was perfectly legal in every state, and today would get him 5 years in federal prison. Your great-grandfather did not call the sheriff. The sheriff was 12 miles away on horseback. He handled it himself, and the weapons he used were not the rifles hanging over the mantel. Those were for deer and coyotes. The real self-defense arsenal lived under floorboards, inside walking sticks, and sewn into the lining of a Sunday coat. Number 14 on this list was sold in the Sears Roebuck catalog for 85 cents. Number 3 was carried by a sitting Supreme Court justice. Before we count down, hit subscribe, because what our great-grandfathers kept in their homesteads would put most of us in cuffs today. Let's begin. Number 20, the cast iron skillet by the bed. Every homestead kitchen had one, and every homestead bedroom had one too. A 12-inch Griswold or Wagner skillet weighed close to 8 pounds of solid American pig iron, swung on a wooden handle that fit a woman's grip like it was made for her. In 1912, a new skillet cost 70 cents at the general store, and most were handed down from mothers who had already put them to work for 30 years. Farm wives kept theirs within reach of the bed, usually hung on a nail or resting on a chair, because when a man broke the latch at 2 in the morning, you had maybe 4 seconds to decide whether to scream or swing. Court records from rural counties across Missouri, Kentucky, and Oklahoma are full of coroners' reports that end with the phrase, "struck about the head with a domestic cooking implement." No jury in those counties ever convicted a woman for it. The skillet was not a weapon until it was, and that was the point. Today, intent transforms it under every modern assault statute. Your great-grandmother just called it Tuesday. Number 19, the axe handle behind the door. Not the axe, the handle. Every back door in rural America had one leaned against the jamb. A hickory or ash shaft about 30 inches long, sometimes still wrapped in the leather grip the man of the house had soaked and shrunk onto it himself. An axe was too much. It would kill a man outright and bring the law. A handle would break a collarbone, a jaw, or a knee, and send the trespasser crawling back into the dark without a funeral. Hickory weighs more than you would think. A good handle, swung at full extension, delivered about the same force as a pitched fastball to the skull. Farmers kept them by the door because traveling men walked the roads in those years. Some were selling brushes, some were not. Your great-grandfather did not open the door without that handle in his left hand. Today, that same prepositioned stick near an entryway shows up in prosecutors' briefs as evidence of premeditation. Back then, it was just what you did. Number 18, the bullwhip coiled on the barn wall. 10 feet of braided kangaroo or cowhide with a popper on the tip that broke the sound barrier when it cracked. A man who knew how to use one, and most did, could take an eye out at 10 paces or rap an attacker's throat before he closed the distance. In 1900, a Texas drover would pay $4 for a good whip and consider it the best money he ever spent. But the whip was not just for cattle. When two-legged threats came up the drive, the whip came off the wall, and you would hear it before you saw it, that pistol-shot crack that told every drifter within half a mile the homestead was awake and unhappy. Modern laws in most states now classify braided whips as prohibited offensive weapons when carried with intent. Your great-grandfather carried it to church, and no one blinked. Number 17, the loaded riding crop. First pattern break, and here is where things get interesting, because this one traveled in polite society. A lady's riding crop looked like a slim leather switch, maybe 20 inches long, with a braided loop at the handle. What nobody mentioned in the catalog was that the knob end was often cast in lead, wrapped in leather, and weighted to 8 or 9 ounces. A respectable woman in 1905 could carry one openly into a hotel, a train car, or a theater. And when a man on a dark street put his hand where it did not belong, she could crack his temple with a tool nobody would ever call a weapon. Harrods and Macy's both sold weighted crops, explicitly advertised for ladies traveling alone. The advertisement language was coded. They called it personal protection. Today, a lead-weighted striking implement disguised as something innocent is a textbook definition of a prohibited concealed weapon in 38 states. Your great-grandmother carried one in her purse to the opera. Number 16, the straight razor under the pillow. A Sheffield or Sewn-in steel straight razor cost about $1.50 in 1910, honed to an edge that could split a falling hair. Men used them every morning to shave. They also used them every night for something else. The razor rested in its leather strop, hung on the bedpost, or folded shut beneath the pillow where a hand could find it in the dark without looking. The blade opened with a flick of the thumb, locked against the spine, and delivered a cut so clean the victim often did not feel it for a full second. Barbershop lore across New Orleans, Chicago, and Philadelphia carries hundreds of stories of husbands defending homes with the same blade they had used at the washstand an hour earlier. The razor was legal, ordinary, and present in every household in America. Today, carrying a straight razor with the intent to use it as a weapon violates concealed blade statutes in almost every urban jurisdiction. Your great-grandfather just called it his razor. Number 15, the slungshot. Not a slingshot, a slungshot. One letter and a world of difference. This was a weighted ball, usually lead or iron, sewn into a leather pouch and attached to a braided cord or leather thong about 18 inches long. Sailors invented it, dock workers perfected it, farmers kept one hanging in the smokehouse. Swung in a tight arc, a 6-ounce slungshot delivered the same impact as a police baton at about 1/10 of the cost, and you could make one in an afternoon with scrap lead and a piece of saddle leather. A boy of 12 could carry one in his overall pocket and nobody would know. During the 1850s through the 1890s, the slungshot was so commonly used in street robberies that the New York legislature banned it by name in 1849, one of the first specific weapon bans in American history. Rural men kept making them anyway. It was the original expedient weapon. Today, possession of a slungshot is a felony in California, Michigan, and a dozen other states. Your great-grandfather braided the cord himself by lamplight. Number 14, the life preserver, not the kind you throw off a boat. In the catalog language of 1895, a life preserver was a short leather-covered cosh, about 10 inches long, with a spring steel shaft and a lead-weighted head. Sears Roebuck sold them for 85 cents, shipped discreetly, and advertised to night watchmen, bank messengers, and gentlemen who walk in the city after dark. The spring shaft meant you could crack a man's collarbone with a wrist flick, no shoulder motion required, which made it devastating in close quarters. A homesteader on a trip to Kansas City or St. Louis would tuck one into his jacket alongside his pocket watch. When the knock came at the hotel door at 1 a.m., he did not need a gun. He needed 8 inches of steel, lead, and leather. The Federal Mailing of Dangerous Articles Act of 1927 eventually banned them from the postal system. State laws followed. Today, every modern weapon statute in America specifically names the cosh, sap, or blackjack as a prohibited item. In 1895, it shipped in plain brown paper for less than $1. Number 13, The Blackjack, cousin to the life preserver, but made to be carried every day. The classic Blackjack was a flat leather pouch, about 6 inches long, filled with lead shot and stitched along a flexible spine so it slapped rather than struck. Police carried them. Bouncers carried them. Prohibition-era bartenders kept one under the bar next to the bungalow key. Homesteaders who made the occasional trip to town carried one in the small of the back, tucked into the belt where a jacket hid it completely. The beauty of a blackjack was that it knocked a man unconscious without breaking the skin, which meant no blood, no mess, and often no complaint to the authorities, because the man who got hit was usually up to no good himself. Prices in the 1915 Sears catalog ran from 90 cents to $2. Bureau of Investigation records from the 1930s show blackjacks carried by bank guards, mailmen, and rural postmasters as standard issue. Today, the blackjack is banned in at least 22 states, with possession alone constituting a felony in several. Your great-grandfather kept one in his Sunday coat. Number 12, brass knuckles. This is the second pattern break, and this one will surprise you because brass knuckles were not a criminal weapon in 1910. They were a working man's weapon, cast brass or nickel-plated, shaped to fit across the fingers with a palm brace. They turned a fist into something that could shatter a jaw in one punch. Farmhands, miners, and railroad men carried them in lunch pails the way modern workers carry a pocket knife. Prize-fighters trained with them for conditioning. The 1902 Sears catalog offered a pair of quality brass knuckles for 15 cents, less than a box of shotgun shells, and described them in the text as a useful novelty for personal defense. A Homestead father handed them down to his son at 15, the same way he handed down a pocket watch. Here is the part most people miss. Brass knuckles were legal in most states until the 1920s and the 1930s. The bans came during Prohibition, when state legislatures swept up a whole category of what they called gangster weapons in one pass. Today, possession alone is a felony in California, New York, Illinois, and over a dozen other states. A Homestead toolbox in 1905 likely contained a pair next to the wire stretchers. Number 11, the push dagger palm grip knife. A blade about 3 inches long, T-shaped, with a crossbar handle that sat in the palm and let the blade jut out between the middle and ring fingers. You did not stab with a push dagger. You punched, and the blade did the rest. Gamblers in Nevada, Colorado, and Arizona carried them in a vest pocket. Homestead women kept them in the sewing basket, hidden among pin cushions and thimbles, because a push dagger, in a woman's hand equalized any size difference instantly. The blade cost about 75 cents from any cutlery maker, and the better ones were double-edged spear points hand-ground by Sheffield craftsmen. The push dagger earned its reputation in the Barbary Coast district of San Francisco in the 1880s, where a 5'2" saloon girl could drop a 200-pound drunk in one motion. Today, the push dagger is specifically prohibited in 23 states under concealed weapon statutes named in the law the same way the slungshot was named. Your great-grandmother kept hers in her apron pocket when a traveling preacher came to supper. Number 10, the boot knife. Slim, double-edged, about 5 to 7 inches long, sheathed flat against the inside of a riding boot or brogan. Every cattleman, sheep herder, timber cruiser, and wagon driver in America in 1900 owned one. The blade sat low on the ankle, outside the pant leg if you were working, or inside the boot top if you were traveling. A right-handed man carried his on the left boot for a cross draw. When a fight closed the distance and a pistol was too slow or too empty, the boot knife came up in a reverse grip and ended the argument. Bowie-style boot knives made by companies like Marbles and Russell cost about $1.20 in 1908. Modern state knife laws often prohibit any fixed blade longer than 3 or 4 inches carried concealed. Boot knives, by their nature, are fixed, concealed, and longer. Your great-grandfather pulled his on every morning before his left boot went on. Number 9. The belt buckle knife. This one looked exactly like an oversized belt buckle, bronze or nickel-plated, usually engraved with an eagle, a horseshoe, or a woman's monogram. Squeeze 2 hidden tabs on the back, and a 4-inch blade slid free from the bone of the buckle itself. The belt stayed on. The blade came off. A man being held at gunpoint in 1895 could stand with his hands raised, fingers resting on his own pult, and draw a knife in plain sight without the assailant ever recognizing what was happening until the blade was already moving. These were marketed discreetly through mail-order houses and gun shops. Prices ran from $2 to $4 depending on the ornamental work. Today, disguised blades are a specific federal concern under the Switchblade Knife Act of 1958, and they are independently banned in most states. A belt buckle knife crosses almost every modern restriction at once. Your great-grandfather wore his to town on market day. Number 8. The sword cane. A gentleman's walking stick, 36 inches of oak, hickory, or ebony, with a brass or ivory head. Twist the head, pull, and 26 inches of single-edged steel came out of the shaft, balanced perfectly, with a point that could pass through a heavy wool coat without slowing. Supreme Court Justice Stephen Field carried one. So did most lawyers, judges, bankers, and doctors who traveled the circuit between small towns in the 1880s and the 1890s. A good sword cane from the Wilkinson Sword Company in London ran about $12. American makers sold them for $4. Here is what makes this one remarkable. The sword cane was not just permitted in polite society, it was expected. A man walking the streets of Chicago or Philadelphia at night without one was considered unprepared. Modern concealed weapon laws almost universally classified disguised blades as the most prohibited category of weapon, with mandatory minimums in some states. Your great-grandfather's cane, the one in the family photo, the one leaning in the corner of the parlor, was almost certainly one of these. Number 7. The cane gun. Third pattern break. If the sword cane was standard issue for the traveling professional, the cane gun was the upgrade. It was a hollow metal shaft disguised as a walking stick. It was typically chambered for .410 shot shell or .44 rimfire, and it fired by a trigger that folded against the shaft. Remington made them, and Belgian makers made them. Prices started around $6 and climbed to $20 for the engraved models. A man on a train platform in 1895 could lean on his cane, converse with a stranger, and fire a charge of birdshot from 3 feet away if the stranger reached for a wallet that was not his. The National Firearms Act of 1934 specifically reclassified cane guns as any other weapons, requiring a federal tax stamp, extensive paperwork, and a background investigation to legally possess one. They are not banned outright, but they are so heavily regulated that virtually nobody owns a functional one legally. Your great-grandfather ordered his from a catalog that also sold butter churns. Number 6. The muff pistol. A woman's weapon designed to fit inside the fur hand warmer, or muff, that every well-dressed lady carried in winter from 1860 through 1920. The muff pistol was typically a .22 or .32 caliber, short-barreled, single-shot or two-shot, weighing under 8 ounces, often nickel-plated with mother-of-pearl grips. A woman walking home from church in January could have her hands inside the muff, finger already on the trigger, and nobody within 10 feet would ever know she was armed. Remington's double derringer was the most famous variant, selling for about $8 in 1900. Frontier saloon women, traveling nurses, farm wives going to market alone, and every respectable woman traveling by train or stagecoach considered it standard equipment. Modern concealed carry laws apply to them the same as to any other handgun. But the real issue is that the muff pistol was often carried by women who had no permit, no registration, and no intention of informing anyone. In 1910, that was legal in most of America. Today, it is a felony in most states. Number 5. The Pepperbox revolver, a multi-barreled pistol, usually 4 or 6 barrels clustered around a central axis, firing in sequence as the trigger was pulled. No rifling, no accuracy past about 10 feet. But at 3 feet, across a kitchen table, a Pepperbox put 6 .31 caliber balls into a man's chest in under 2 seconds. Allen and Thurber of Massachusetts made thousands of them in the 1840s and the 1850s, and they remained common homestead weapons well into the 1890s because they were cheap, reliable, and did not require aim. A Pepperbox sat in the drawer of the kitchen table, loaded, capped, ready. When the door opened without a knock, the lady of the house put her hand on the grip and waited. Prices dropped to under $3 for used pieces by 1900. The Federal Gun Control Act of 1968 brought multi-barreled firearms under the same regulations as modern handguns, and most Pepperboxes today exist only as antiques. Functional ones require federal compliance. Your great-grandmother kept hers next to the flower. Number 4. The Hideout Bible Gun, a hollowed-out family Bible, the one that sat on the parlor table or the nightstand, with the pages carved into the shape of a small revolver or derringer. The book closed with a snap. The cover showed scripture. Nobody, not even a thief searching a house, ever looked inside a Bible. Homesteaders made these themselves with a sharp knife and patience, fitting a pocket revolver into the cavity so precisely that it could be drawn in one motion by a practiced hand. The technique was documented in frontier memoirs from Texas to Montana. Preachers did it, schoolmarms did it. Respectable women who would never be seen near a gun store kept loaded firearms hidden in the Book of Psalms. Today, the practice of concealing a firearm in a disguised container falls under specific federal prohibitions against concealment devices, and state laws compound it. But in 1905, the only law was that the Bible stayed closed when company visited. Your great-grandmother opened hers every Sunday morning and every time the dog barked at the porch. Number 3. The Sewn-in Coat Pocket Revolver, a lightweight pocket pistol, typically a Smith & Wesson .32 caliber hammerless or an Iver Johnson .38 caliber safety automatic, sewn into a reinforced interior pocket of a man's everyday coat. The pocket had no opening to the outside. You reached into the coat through the lapel, not the hip. This meant a man could walk into any room, hand in his coat, adjust his tie, and be holding a loaded 5-shot revolver before anyone noticed his elbow moving. Tailors in Chicago, St. Louis, and Philadelphia advertised this service openly in 1910. The cost was about $1 for the alteration on top of the cost of the gun itself, which ran from $6 to $9. Supreme Court Justice Stephen Field carried a Colt this way when he traveled the California circuit in the 1880s and used it to fatal effect on a rival judge. The story is in the court records. Today, this exact carry method violates virtually every state concealed carry statute because the gun is hidden from plain view and cannot be readily produced for inspection by law enforcement. Your great-grandfather walked to church with his. Number 2. The sawed-off coach gun, a short, deadly double-barrel shotgun, typically 12 or 10 gauge, with the barrels cut down to about 14 to 18 inches and the stock cut down to a pistol grip or cropped buttstock. The original design came from stagecoach guards who rode shotgun, hence the name. By the 1890s, farmers across the country kept a coach gun in the wagon under the seat, loaded with buckshot for the long drive home from town after dark. 14-inch barrels with double-aught buckshot at 10 feet turned a single trigger pull into an unsurvivable event. A new single-barrel shotgun cost about $5. A sawed-off conversion was free. You just took a hacksaw to the gun you already had. This is the weapon that ended Bonnie and Clyde, wielded by Texas Rangers, and it was the standard Homestead insurance policy for a generation. The National Firearms Act of 1934 made short-barreled shotguns a restricted class requiring federal registration, a $200 tax stamp, and a background investigation. Cutting down a shotgun today without federal paperwork is a 10-year federal felony. Your great-grandfather did it with a handsaw on the back porch. Number 1. The trench knife, a single weapon that combined everything in the Homestead arsenal into one fist-sized package. A heavy, double-edged blade about 7 inches long, mounted on a brass knuckle handle with a spiked pommel for striking rearward. The U.S. model 1918 Mark I was the most famous version, issued to American soldiers in the First World War, and tens of thousands of them came home in duffel bags when the boys returned in 1919. Fathers unpacked them, wrapped them in oilcloth, and laid them in the top dresser drawer. Sons grew up knowing where it was. The trench knife was the complete close-quarters weapon. Punch with the knuckles, slash with the blade, strike with the pommel, all in one motion, all with one hand. No other Homestead weapon combined so many functions so efficiently. And here is the reason it tops this list. Today, the Mark I trench knife is specifically illegal to possess in California, New York, Massachusetts, and a dozen other states because it simultaneously violates laws against brass knuckles, fixed blade concealed weapons, and spiked strike implements. A single object breaks 3 statutes at once. Your great-grandfather brought his home from France with his discharge papers and kept it in the nightstand until the day he died. His widow found it wrapped in an oiled rag, still sharp, still ready, 70 years later. Here is my challenge. Go look in your grandfather's old toolbox. Check the back of his closet. Open the drawer in the nightstand nobody has touched since 1962. You might find something that was perfectly legal when it was made, and that is a felony to own today. These were not the weapons of criminals. They were the weapons of farmers, fathers, and widows who lived 12 miles from the nearest lawman and who understood that protecting a homestead meant being ready for what walked up the drive at midnight. The laws changed. The threats did not. Your great-grandfather knew. Now you know too.